Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into the world of ancient Egypt, specifically the lush, fragrant realm of perfumes. Imagine yourself stepping into a bustling Egyptian marketplace, the air heavy with the sweet, earthy aroma of incense, flowers, and oils. It's warm, but there's a cool breeze carrying the scent of something exotic, something mysterious. You can't quite place it, but it's intoxicating, drawing you in like a whisper you're meant to hear. Perfume was a part of daily life here, and not just in the way we might use it to smell good. No, it was woven into the fabric of everything. From the hum of temple priests anointing idols with fragrant oils to the queens and pharaohs using it as a subtle but powerful tool for influence. In fact, you probably wouldn't last long in ancient Egypt without at least a hint of perfume on your skin. You see, it wasn't just about luxury. It was about status, power, and, in many cases, survival. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, leave a comment with your location and the time there. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Perfume in ancient Egypt wasn't just a pleasant accessory. It was a signifier of culture, a tool for communication, and, in many cases, a symbol of divine favor. You see, it wasn't just about smelling good, although that was a key part. Perfume was used to mark your place in the social order. The more powerful you were, the more intense and exotic your fragrance. It was like an ancient version of wearing a designer label. But instead of a logo on your sleeve, you had a scent trail that declared your status. Imagine walking down a street and being able to tell who's who by the scent in the air. A subtle, yet constant reminder of the hierarchy around you. For the common person, the scent might be a simple mix of natural oils and herbs. But for those at the top, pharaohs, queens, high priests, and aristocrats, the perfumes were concoctions of the rarest, most expensive ingredients. You could expect them to wear blends made from frankincense, myrrh, and the most exotic flowers from across the empire. Historians still argue whether this scent-driven social system could have played as big a role in reinforcing class divides as clothing or architecture. But one thing is for sure, in ancient Egypt, if you didn't smell the part, you weren't fitting in. Even the temples of Egypt were perfumed. As part of religious rituals, priests would sprinkle fragrant oils and incense on idols and statues, believing the gods would be attracted to the offerings. The air would be thick with the scent of resins, myrrh, and frankincense, creating a kind of sacred atmosphere that set the mood for divine communication. But it wasn't just the gods who appreciated these offerings. Humans were drawn to them, too. Perfume had a way of connecting the earthly with the divine, creating an atmosphere of reverence and calm, a bit like how certain scents today can bring us peace and relaxation. Perfume was also a subtle way of saying something about who you were. Historians know that Egyptian elites used perfumes to mark special occasions, from state events to personal celebrations, but it was more than just a social marker. It was deeply personal. The right perfume could give you an aura of divinity, a sense of sacredness. You'd walk among the gods just by the scent you wore. It was no longer just about pleasing the senses, but about becoming part of something larger, something eternal. And if you could afford the best perfumes, well, it said everything about your place in the world. As we move through this fragrant history, we'll see that perfumes were much more than just luxury items for the privileged few. They were vital to everyday life in ancient Egypt, and the impact of these scents stretched far beyond the Nile. They were used in ceremonies, in personal rituals, and even in the preparation of the dead for their journey into the afterlife. The concept of perfume in ancient Egypt wasn't merely about scenting oneself with something lovely. It was far more complex than that, almost a currency of the senses. Imagine the delicacy of a finely woven tapestry, where every thread has a distinct purpose. In the same way, each fragrance had a meaning, and its wearer was communicating a message with every whiff. The scent you wore could declare your rank in society, your wealth, and, in some cases, your spiritual connection. Perfume became an invisible but very real form of social currency. For the elite, perfume wasn't just an indulgence, it was a statement. To walk through a crowd of people in ancient Egypt and have the air around you smell of rare flowers from distant lands or the incense used in temple rituals, well, that was the equivalent of walking into a room wearing a crown. Imagine that you're standing among the marketplace, the din of voices and the chatter of merchants all around, and the first thing people notice about you isn't your face or your clothes, but the scent that precedes you. It's a form of silent communication, an unseen aura that can speak louder than words. Historians still debate the exact role of perfume in establishing power dynamics. But it's clear that this fragrance-based hierarchy was woven deeply into Egyptian culture. The pharaohs would wear scents composed of frankincense and myrrh, both revered for their religious and medicinal properties. These were not just pleasant smells, they were meant to signal that the wearer had a connection to the divine, and that they were, in fact, the living gods on earth. Lower in the social ranks, less exotic blends might be worn, but they still played a crucial role in the social fabric, signaling one's occupation and social status. It's a little bit like how today's luxury brands often serve as both symbols of wealth and signals of one's place in the world. The only difference? Instead of logos, ancient Egyptians carried their status in the air around them. But not everyone was fortunate enough to wear the finest, most expensive perfumes. The artisans who created these scents, those who mixed the oils and resins with skill and knowledge, were a class of their own. We know that perfume making was a highly specialized craft. Skilled perfumers were often seen as almost sacred figures. They worked with natural oils, flowers, and even animal fats to create the fragrant oils that could be used by the elite. These artisans were often kept in service to the temples, their craft being integral to religious ceremonies. What's fascinating is that the very process of making perfume was treated with almost as much reverence as the final product. The Egyptians believed that fragrances could influence the gods, and in turn, they could influence the very fabric of their lives. So, perfume making was a ritualistic act, almost like alchemy, where the oils and ingredients were treated with the utmost care and respect. They didn't just mix things together. They blended different scents with intention and purpose, hoping to achieve the perfect balance that would please the gods and elevate the wearer to a higher level of favor. And here's where it gets really interesting. Perfume was not just about wearing the fragrance, it was about creating a presence. The Egyptians used scent in nearly every part of their lives, personal rituals, religious ceremonies, and even the preparation of the dead for the afterlife. That's right, perfume didn't just accompany the living. It followed them into the next world. For the ancient Egyptians, scent was an essential part of the journey into the afterlife. Perfume was placed in tombs, offered to the deceased as part of their burial rituals, and used in the mummification process to ensure that the spirit would find peace in the afterlife. So not only could perfume help secure your place in the living world, but it could also accompany you beyond the mortal realm. This idea of perfume as a life force, as something that could connect the living to the divine and the dead, shows just how intertwined scent was with ancient Egyptian beliefs. Perfume was far more than a simple luxury. It was a powerful tool of communication, of influence, and, most importantly, a vessel for the soul's journey. Imagine a world where a simple fragrance could dictate so much about your status, your health, your spirituality, and even your place in eternity. Historians still argue about how exactly perfume's role in religious ceremonies worked on a practical level. Some suggest that the presence of scent during rituals was meant to purify the space, while others believe that it was more about the sensual and emotional experience, drawing participants closer to the divine. Either way, the scents used in temples and tombs were rich in meaning, layering an emotional connection to the divine with a sensory experience. The elite of Egypt certainly weren't shy about using perfume to enhance their status. But the more intriguing aspect of ancient Egyptian perfume culture is how it permeated every level of society. The perfume may have been the outward manifestation of power and divine favor for the elite, but it was also a deeply personal experience. Perfumes were tailored to suit an individual's needs, whether to calm the nerves, to invigorate the spirit, or to prepare for the divine. Let's dive into what made these perfumes so special. Imagine walking through an Egyptian garden where the air is thick with the scent of blooming flowers, myrrh trees, and fresh herbs. That heady mix of fragrance isn't just for the pleasure of your nose, it's part of something much deeper. The ingredients used in Egyptian perfumes were a carefully selected combination of nature's finest offerings, each chosen for their symbolism and their potency. You're probably familiar with the smell of roses or jasmine, but in ancient Egypt, the use of flowers in perfume was an entirely different affair. Some of the most sought-after blooms were not native to Egypt. This meant that perfumes were an expression of Egypt's global connections. Trade routes stretched from the edges of Africa to the farthest reaches of Asia and Europe, bringing with them rare flowers and spices. The Egyptians didn't just use the typical local flora, they went hunting for exotic flowers from as far away as India. Historians often point to the exotic nature of these blooms as symbols of Egypt's influence and the grandeur of its leaders. If you could afford it, your fragrance was a reminder that you were plugged into a global network of luxury and power. You could also find precious oils such as olive oil, which was a base for many perfumes. Imagine the rich, thick texture of this oil, serving as the base for a perfect balance of other ingredients. But it didn't stop there. The Egyptians also used animal fats, particularly from fat-tailed sheep, to create lasting scents. These fats were combined with flowers, resins, and oils to create long-lasting perfumes that stayed on the skin for hours, if not days. And let's not forget about resins like frankincense and myrrh, which were considered divine scents associated with both the gods and the afterlife. Historians still debate whether the use of animal fats in perfume was more symbolic or practical. While some suggest that it was simply a way to make perfumes last longer, others argue that it had a spiritual significance. After all, in a society as steeped in ritual as Egypt, every ingredient had meaning. Whether you were creating a scent for a religious ceremony or for everyday wear, every element was carefully chosen with symbolic intent. The oils, the resins, and the flowers weren't just for fragrance, they were for connection. Connection to the gods, to the eternal, and to the powerful forces that guided life and death. The process of blending these ingredients into a perfume was a sacred art. A master perfumer would mix the oils in precise proportions, ensuring the scent was balanced and harmonious. You can almost imagine the soft, repetitive motions of an artisan blending these substances together, in an atmosphere thick with smoke from incense and the faint glow of oil lamps. The act of creating perfume was not a hasty one. It took time, care, and patience. The result was not just a fragrance, it was an experience, a sensory journey that could transport you to another world. Perfume making in ancient Egypt was a specialized craft, and those who excelled at it were often highly respected members of society. These artisans were often closely tied to the temples and royal courts, where they would create unique blends for the most powerful figures. Imagine being a master perfumer in a royal court, charged with creating a fragrance for a pharaoh or a queen. It wasn't just about making them smell good, it was about making them smell divine. It was a way of linking them to the gods themselves. This was not something you learned overnight. The skills were passed down through generations, as the secrets of the craft were closely guarded. But perfume wasn't just about status, it was also deeply practical. Egyptians used scents in everyday life for personal hygiene, to ward off insects, and to create a sense of well-being. For example, the Egyptians used perfumes as part of their bathing rituals. After a bath, people would apply oils and perfumes to their skin, creating a luxurious feeling of cleanliness and comfort. The aroma of the oils would linger on their skin, acting as a constant reminder of their connection to the divine and to the powerful forces that govern their world. In fact, it's believed that perfume was used not only for personal adornment, but also for medicinal purposes. Many of the ingredients in Egyptian perfumes, such as frankincense and myrrh, had powerful antiseptic properties. These resins were not just a sweet smell, they had the ability to disinfect wounds and promote healing. Imagine walking into a temple with the smell of frankincense hanging in the air. It wasn't just about the ambience, it was a practical tool in warding off illness. Historians still argue whether these healing properties were understood scientifically or if they were more symbolic. Some believe that ancient Egyptians used perfumes purely for their spiritual or medicinal properties, while others suggest that the people of the time were ahead of their era, recognizing the health benefits of these natural ingredients. Either way, there's no doubt that Egyptian perfumes were multifaceted, and their value is far more than just superficial. As we move through the layers of ancient Egyptian perfume culture, it's clear that fragrance wasn't just an accessory, it was a tool. A tool for communication, for spiritual connection, for protection, and even for healing. Perfume was a way of entering a world where the senses were heightened, where you could transcend the physical and connect with something divine. Let's shift focus now, from the bustling streets of Egypt and the aromatic marketplaces to the quieter, sacred spaces where perfume played an even more profound role, temples and religious ceremonies. In ancient Egypt, scent wasn't just a luxury or a status symbol, it was a direct link to the divine. You could be strolling through the streets wearing the finest perfume, but it was in the temple where perfume took on its most sacred and transformative power. The temples of Egypt were sanctuaries for the gods, and everything within them was designed to reflect divine perfection. This is where perfume became more than a personal fragrance. It became a sacred tool used in rituals that were meant to honor the gods and invite their presence into the temple. Picture the scene. Inside the towering stone walls, the air thick with incense smoke and the faint, earthy sweetness of myrrh, as priests carefully prepare fragrant oils. The ritual was not a hurried one. It was slow, deliberate, and reverent. Each oil, each incense, each fragrance had its own place in the ceremony, and each scent was associated with a specific god. Imagine you're standing there, in the shadows of a great temple, watching as a priest takes an alabaster jar filled with precious oils and begins to pour it onto the altar. The smell of frankincense fills the air, its sweet, smoky scent creating an atmosphere of reverence. It's not just for the sake of fragrance, it's a symbol. Frankincense was considered the scent of the gods themselves. In fact, it was said that the gods would be drawn to the fragrance, making their presence known in the temple. The Egyptians believed that the gods could smell the offerings and that a perfectly prepared scent could draw their favor, ensuring blessings for the people. But the significance of perfume in Egyptian religious rituals wasn't just about the gods. It was about creating a sensory experience that was intended to elevate the soul. Every step of the ritual, from the preparation of the oils to their application on the body or the altar, was imbued with spiritual meaning. Imagine the feeling of having your own body anointed with a fragrant oil, something that connects you, physically, to the divine. This was not just about perfume, it was about transcendence. The fragrance you wore in the temple wasn't just a luxury or a personal statement. It was a way to become one with the divine energy that filled the space. It wasn't just the pharaohs and the high priests who participated in these rituals. Everyone, from the highest officials to the common people, used perfume to draw near to the gods. The presence of perfume in religious rituals wasn't an elitist activity, it was a communal experience. It was a way for the people to feel connected to the divine on a deeply personal level. In many ways, it was the invisible thread that linked everyone in the temple. When you entered that sacred space, you were enveloped in a cloud of perfume, the scent becoming a kind of medium through which you could communicate with the gods. Historians still argue about the specific ways that perfumes were used in these rituals. Some suggest that the incense and oils were simply used to create a pleasing atmosphere, while others believe that the fragrance had a more direct spiritual function. Some texts even suggest that perfume was used as a form of prayer, with each specific scent representing a different prayer or intention. The idea that smell could influence the spiritual world, that a perfect fragrance could sway the favor of the gods, is a fascinating concept that we still don't fully understand today. But what we do know is that perfume was an essential part of the religious experience in Egypt. As we explore this deeper, it becomes clear that perfume wasn't just a luxury or a personal indulgence. It was an essential part of Egypt's spiritual landscape. Imagine walking through a temple and feeling completely surrounded by the sacred aroma of oils and incense, the air thick with the scent of the divine. The experience of being enveloped by this fragrant cloud would have been profound, connecting the individual to the gods and to the larger spiritual forces at work in the world. Perfume in these sacred spaces wasn't just about smell. It was about sensation. The temple was a space designed to engage all of your senses, from the sight of the grand columns and statues of gods to the sound of chants and prayers. And the scent? That was the final touch that elevated everything. It wasn't just about creating an atmosphere, it was about creating an experience. The fragrances were the invisible bridge between the mortal and divine, connecting the human world to the spiritual realm. In this context, perfume was more than just something you wore. It was a tool of transformation, a way to transcend the physical world and enter into a space where the divine was not only felt but experienced on a sensory level. And this, ultimately, is why perfume played such a central role in Egyptian religious life. It wasn't just about luxury, status, or even hygiene. It was about connection. Connection to the gods, to the divine, and to the eternal forces that govern life, death, and everything in between. Perfume's role in ancient Egypt wasn't confined to temples and the palaces of the elite. Its influence spread across daily life, as it was woven into the fabric of Egyptian culture in ways we might not immediately recognize. As we transition from sacred spaces to the more mundane realities of ancient Egypt, we begin to see just how deeply embedded perfume was in the daily routines of all Egyptians. From the rich to the common people. Let's start with something most of us can relate to: hygiene. Imagine yourself in ancient Egypt, standing at a small basin of water, preparing to cleanse your skin for the day. Unlike today, where we're surrounded by commercial soaps, shampoos, and synthetic perfumes, the Egyptians used nature's ingredients. Olive oil, fragrant herbs, and flower-based oils were mixed into their daily bathing rituals. After scrubbing away the dust of the day, they would apply oils and perfumes to their skin, not only to ward off the harsh sun and dry air, but to leave behind a lingering, pleasant scent. It's easy to forget that personal hygiene in ancient times wasn't always focused on cleanliness as much as it was on protection and sensory delight. Perfume was a vital part of Egyptian hygiene, as it served practical purposes beyond its pleasant aroma. The oils and perfumes were often used as a form of skin protection, particularly in the scorching heat of Egypt's climate. The act of applying these perfumes was also believed to help regulate body temperature, and oils such as those made from coconut and palm trees had natural cooling effects. Imagine walking outside under the burning sun, your skin protected not just from the heat, but also from the harsh winds that could dry you out. The perfume, much like the oils, was a shield, one that spoke of self-care, of taking time to feel good, and, of course, of looking good. While the elite might have had access to the finest fragrances, the middle class also took great care in selecting their perfumes. Scent was an integral part of their personal identity and daily life. But the composition of their perfumes might not have been as extravagant. Common perfumes often consisted of local flowers, resins, and oils, ingredients that were less rare but still carried significant value. These fragrances, while not as exotic as those worn by the pharaohs, still held meaning. For instance, a common blend might feature the sweet aroma of lotus flowers, which held symbolic significance for the ancient Egyptians. The lotus was a symbol of rebirth and creation, and its fragrance would be used by many to invoke these powers in their own lives. Historians still debate whether these more affordable perfumes were primarily for aesthetic purposes or if they carried deeper spiritual significance for the average Egyptian. Some argue that even the simplest fragrances were still meant to connect the wearer to the divine, albeit in a more subtle way. Others suggest that the use of perfumes in everyday life was more about the luxury of comfort and the desire to experience beauty on a daily basis. Either way, the use of perfume in daily life was deeply ingrained in Egyptian society and offered a means of personal expression, no matter one's social standing. Then there's the symbolic power of scent. The Egyptians had a strong belief that perfumes had the ability to ward off evil spirits and negative energies. This belief was so deeply embedded in their culture that it influenced not just the upper class, but also the common folk. When you wore perfume in ancient Egypt, it wasn't just to smell pleasant, it was to protect yourself. Scents were seen as a form of spiritual armor. Whether you were preparing for a trip, entering a social gathering, or simply going about your daily routine, the perfume you wore acted as a safeguard against the unseen forces of the world. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? The idea that a simple scent could act as a protective shield. Even in death, perfume played a significant role in Egyptian society. As we mentioned earlier, fragrance wasn't just for the living, it was meant to accompany the dead into the afterlife as well. As part of the mummification process, the dead were anointed with oils and resins to preserve their bodies and ensure a peaceful journey to the next life. But the use of fragrance didn't stop there. It was also believed that the scent would help guide the soul of the deceased, providing them with a comforting aroma in the afterlife. For the Egyptians, scent was an essential part of the journey to immortality. It's a thought-provoking concept, isn't it? That even in death, the Egyptians cared about the sensory experiences of the soul. This deeply spiritual understanding of perfume extended into all aspects of Egyptian life. Whether it was used in the rituals of the living, the ceremonies in temples, or the rites of the dead, fragrance was a constant companion to every stage of life. Perfume wasn't just about aesthetics or luxury, it was about the belief that fragrance could connect you to the divine, protect you from harm, and even ensure your immortality. Historians still argue about how widespread this belief was. Some believe that perfume played an equally important role for both the common people and the elite, while others suggest that the use of fragrance in death and the afterlife was reserved for the wealthiest Egyptians. Regardless of these debates, one thing is clear. In ancient Egypt, perfume was so much more than a luxury. It was a powerful tool for connecting with the gods, protecting the body and soul, and transcending the mundane world into the realm of the divine.